tropes. We kind of explore those tropes and kind of try and bring them alive in the game and subvert them. Yeah. Movies like Ghost Ship and Triangle, you know, that sense of isolation, of being trapped in a location and not being able to get out of it. So that just I think one of the things was the idea of the sea as a kind of dark and powerful force. And there's lots of myths about the sea that sailors have, and we always like to start from myths or from urban myths or urban legends as some little bit of truth in the world. So that was where we started, and then it was about fleshing out that world and working out, finding the characters. That was really important to work out what the characters in our story were going to be like and how they would interact with that world. And it's mysterious, and no one has worked out what happened on that ship. So this was an opportunity to tell our version of that story. It's a completely new narrative. There'll be new characters, a new cast. There is one character that appears in all the Dark Picture stories, and that's the curator. That's this guy who he introduces the story, and at key points in the story, he'll talk straight to you and he'll kind of comment on your progress or give you hints. He's kind of quite a strange character, but he's very much his own character. He's a bit more sinister than the psychiatrist, but yeah, he appears and he talks directly to you in the same way. It's a big branching narrative game like Until Dawn was. You'll be making choices, you'll be exploring environments, trying to get your characters out alive. Yeah, so we learned a huge amount from Until Dawn about how to make this sort of game and how to make a scary game, and we've taken all that knowledge and brought it over into Man of Medan. Yeah, there's a bunch of new features. There are new ways of interacting in the world. One thing we always try to do is how do we put you into that story, and how do we, when you interact with the controller, how does that carry through into the world of the game? So we've got some new kind of interactions. We've got a heartbeat mechanic where you have to kind of control your heartbeat. We've got a button mash mechanic where you have to push things open. So we've got those new interactions, and we've got new ways of tracking the character relationships and the traits and things like that. So you can explore how you've affected the way those characters feel about each other. That was this is all about the subgenres. We explore the kind of genres of horror, and the kind of monster movie was where ultimately Until Dawn was. This is Ghost Ship. So yeah, a haunted ship, and you find out the secrets of that ship as you play the game.
Yeah, so I play a character named Conrad, who's kind of well-off American 20-something. He's very brash, he's very confident, and he rubs some people the wrong way, which is what Tom was just talking about. He has an interaction with some local fishermen, and he just kind of acts like not the nicest guy in the world, and instigates some of the actions that sort of lead them to this ghost ship, essentially. And that's kind of what I liked about this character. I've never quite played a guy like him. He's the kind of character that people will either love or hate, which is good, I think, for a story like this, and also for a survival story and a bit of a detective story. Like, you know, you're the characters, the players have to navigate this environment and interact with everything. And Conrad has no filter. He says everything that comes to his mind, whether it's the right thing to say or not. And so it was a very fun character to play because he can be rude, he can be funny, all at the same time, which is what was interesting as an actor. So usually you play, you get a script, a film or television script, and there's only one story. There's one version of the character. With Conrad and with all the characters in the game, the character shifts depending on the choices the player makes. So, for example, there's a heroic version of Conrad in this story, and there's also potentially a cowardly version of Conrad in the story. As an actor, you get to explore both sides of that. And so the player, as they choose what Conrad does, he becomes a different character within that player's experience. Oh, absolutely. Every character can survive, and every character can die.
Yeah, you play as a whole bunch of characters. Conrad kind of is our main character. You play as a whole bunch of any one of 5 characters. They can all live or they can all die, and you never know when that's going to happen. So you can never quite relax because death is kind of everywhere in the game.
Sounds like fun.
It kind of is because you never know. You're always on your toes. Even tiny little decisions, you have to think really hard about because ultimately you could get yourself killed. So just the scenes can play out differently depending on what you've done earlier in the game, and then we don't know who's going to be alive and who's going to be dead. So those endings could be different depending on who's alive and who's dead, and who gets away and who doesn't. So there are a huge number of possibilities for the endings.
And some crazy endings.
And some crazy.
We were talking about earlier. There was one. I'm not going to spoil it, but there was one ending that they told us about at the end, and I was like, I cannot believe that you're doing that. There's a lot of crazy endings. There's some happy, there's not happy, but there's one in particular where I was just like, I can't believe you're gonna do that to the players. But I loved it. It's fantastic. Very creative, very interesting.
No, the run time is between 4 and 5 hours, and you'll always get that 4 and 5 hours, and you'll always get a really good story, but it won't be the same as anyone else's story quite. So, it's 4 or 5 hours. We think our replay value is very, very high. So that's the thing we learned from Until Dawn, that as soon as people play it, they get to the ending and then they go back and they try and change the things that they did and try and get a different ending. And we really tried to enable that. And one of the reasons why Shawn had a script that was literally that big,
I mean, they handed me the script. It was like 1,000 pages.
It's so we thought about all the different ways that you could play it. And when you go back, you make different choices. You'll genuinely get, sometimes whole scenes will be there or not there, or will be different, or they'll play out in a very, very different way. So we think there's a huge amount of replayability. And people have fun just going back in, trying out different things, finding new content. We're confident people will enjoy doing that. And one of the cool things is that we get the player thinking themselves. They're looking at the world and they're working it out without us having to tell them. And then they find things in the world, and they can read about something on a bit of paper or find an object, and they can relate that to the rest of the world. So that keeps players really engaged, that sort of storytelling. Yeah,
that's like being a detective.
There's a bunch of the stuff you can collect. So we got secrets, which are things in the world which will tell you a tiny bit of information about the backstory, and on its own that bit of information isn't much good, but when you find a load of them, you can piece things together. This is the detective thing, and you work out what's gone on, and that can help you survive. And we also have these premonitions. These are pictures that you find in the world that give you a tiny little glimpse of a possible future. And the idea is that if you can work out how that can help you, then that can, you can use that to your own good. Yeah. So it's about giving different styles of gameplay over that runtime. So sometimes it's exploration, sometimes it's kind of discussing and choosing what to do, and it's making sure those things where you can find out things about the story are spread throughout the game. So some even quite late on, you'll be finding out new stuff, maybe that will make sense of things that happened a long time ago. Other games in the Dark Pictures Anthology will be standalone games, and some of them are already in development. Yeah, I think you'll finish this, you'll get whichever ending, you'll do your replayability, and we hope you'll like that type of game and you'll be connected with the Dark Pictures universe. We have put in some connecting strands between the games, kind of Easter eggs that you can spot things, spot similarities and things between the games. So we think people have fun finding that sort of stuff. Yeah.
First and foremost, I loved the concept. I love the story. I love the genre. So that was kind of what brought me in. And then I looked at the character and I was like, okay, this is, again, I look at Conrad as an instigator, and he's not, I've never played a character like Conrad. So again, first and foremost, I was like, I love what Supermassive does. I liked what Until Dawn was. And so I just wanted to be a part of that. And when I'm choosing roles in games, I want bold storytelling, and I want really narrative, performance-driven characters and stories, and that's what I think Supermassive does, and that's what this did. And then it was like, okay, I'll just jump in with Conrad and just have fun. And truly, it's a fun character. It's almost a larger-than-life character, and that was a lot of fun to play within the context of this crazy, scary story. Some of my favorite scenes to play were before things get too scary. And again, I don't want to spoil too much because I don't think we've directly shown it, but he's a bit of an asshole. I don't know how to say it, but that's what's fun. And again, part of the way that this story gets started is because of Conrad's actions. He's not trying to do anything wrong. He just finds himself on the wrong side of the wrong people. And he also considers himself a ladies' man, which is kind of funny. So he's constantly trying to hit on one of the characters, and it's awkward. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, those are some of my favorite scenes. Just getting to know the character and getting to know the other characters before it all gets crazy. And I think that's really important specifically in the horror genre. Like, you have to care about the characters. You have to understand who they are and how they approach the world, so that when you get into these heightened situations, you can sort of project how they're going to do things. You want to understand that, so it's not completely unpredictable from a character standpoint. Hugely challenging to work with the branching narrative, because you have to try to keep track of all these branching narrative story points and character points. And again, what if a player just makes one decision for Conrad, it makes him, that influences who he becomes, his general demeanor with other characters, or just how he's seen by other characters as well. So it's hard to keep track of all that, but the Supermassive guys really helped us out by tracking that, by having literally like flow charts. So remember, we made this decision here, which led to this decision. So when we're in this scene, this is how you're interacting with these characters. They see you this way, or you're mad at this person, or you could be injured. So don't forget, like, you have to play pain in this scene. Only if you've made these decisions. If you didn't make these decisions, you get to this point of the game and you're not injured. So very complex and complicated to try to track all that, but that's also part of the fun of it.
Mocap process keeps getting better and better, and it becomes better for the actors as well. So we've set you up with a kind of headset on, didn't we? But you were able to walk around.
Oh yeah, it was.
And we get the facial capture is incredibly accurate, so we can get tiny nuances of performance, and that's great for us because we want to make cinematic type games, cinematic quality. We've got great guys back at the studio, very talented audio, lighting guys, camera guys, and then if you give them a really great performance, that's what they need to make a great game. We can. So we set up a stage, and we kind of have the lights on them. We have them all in the middle with the scripts, and it's kind of, we kind of acting it out in an environment that's familiar to them as possible. It's quite an intense shoot,
yeah.
I think, and we have to get through a lot of material, and as Shawn said, it's very complicated. But yeah, it's worth it to get those performances, so that players are really engaged with those characters, really care about those characters, and then they can get scared. When they care about people and you want them to survive, then you get scared.
I think the best part for me too was having the actors there, all the actors. So
you can work off each other.
Every time. So just to go back to the technology, when I did Quantum Break, the cameras that we were using, the head rigs, were a little more cumbersome and much bigger. So now a few years later, when I'm doing Medan, the cameras were much smaller, lighter, easier, so you felt less So really, the cool thing about it was, when I'm acting with another actor, I can look into their face. I mean, we're looking at each other. You have to stay a little ways apart because the cameras kind of come up front, so you can't get too close to each other. But you can be looking in someone's face and sharing that performance and feeding off each other, which is totally, you could achieve a performance just by yourself with a mocap thing and acting off of nobody, but there's something that you will miss if you don't have all the actors in one space, being able to look at each other and even just have a conversation about what the scene is, like discuss what that moment is and adjust too. I felt like we were very free to not change things, but if something's not working for us, have that discussion with the creative people just to make it work for us. And ultimately you're all trying to put your input to create the character, to create the story, and to make it work. And I think that's that chemistry that you can't really control. It just has to happen when you're there all working to try to tell the story and create the best moments possible. A motion capture stage is just a big warehouse. Yes. Like there's not much to it. But they had like these lookbooks for us so we could see what the ship was going to look like. And also like rough videos to like certain environments. And it makes a difference. Like if you're in the cargo hold of a ship, well, is it 40 feet wide or 40 feet tall? Do we have to yell at each other? Or can we speak? You know, how loud is this room? It's the engine room. How loud is that? None of that's there. So it's all created by the team, and then we have to sort of try to implement that. And there often it was, you know, the direction wasn't like about the performance or the nuance of a performance. It was like, you have to speak louder. You know, you're running faster, just things like that, physicalities that you don't have on a motion capture stage that you would have on a traditional film stage. Like, well, they're standing 40 feet away. I know how loud I have to speak to them. But when you're in a small stage standing next to each other, you sometimes have to be reminded, remember, you guys are yelling at each other. You know, there's this much distance. And so we had those images. And if we didn't have that, they knew what the environments were going to look like, so they could explain that to us.
And sometimes we have to really think like movie directors, we kind of do it in reverse from how a movie does it. We get all our data and then we get that into a game engine and then we put cameras in it. And that gives us a lot of freedom. It means we can move cameras around.
Mm-hmm.
When you're shooting a movie, that's it.
You're locked into the shot. Yeah.
But we can move cameras around quite creatively afterwards. But certainly that's where we take our inspiration from, that expertise that comes from movies and from lighting. And that is something that the audience is really familiar with. That's the language they understand of cuts and lighting and how cameras are set. So yeah, absolutely, we're influenced by that, and we want people to be able to engage with it on that level. It's been a good experience going multi-platform. We're very excited to be able to bring our games and these kind of punchy narrative choice-driven games to Xbox and PC and to Sony. So yeah, it's exciting for us to be able to broaden the audience like that, and it's been a very positive experience.